Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm one of your co-hosts, Rico.
I am your other co-host, Tony Borrego.
And this is the podcast known as Relatively Sound, the podcast that we recorded on the edge of town. Now, Tony, have you been? It's been a while. If people didn't know, we recorded our last 4 episodes, the episodes for the month of April, in Washington together. And it was really fun. But then we had a couple weeks in between because I got COVID for the first time in 3 years since COVID started.
Nice.
And now I hear you're a little under the weather, right?
Yes. I think I'm in the back half of it. I think today is kind of where I'm starting to feel a little better, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, so it's been we recorded the last episode, the previous one, which was our Audio Slave episode, couple weeks ago now. So we might be a little rusty at this, but we're starting with this month's episodes today, and we are back with our album for album series. Today, Tony is going to be talking about his thoughts on my suggestion for this week, which is Bruce Springsteen's 4th studio album, Darkness on the Edge of Town, released in 1978. I guess the quick disclaimer for me is I'm a huge Bruce Springsteen fan. Been a fan of his for a while now. My friend Chris got me into him, sent me some of his albums. Kind of never liked him growing up because for some reason I thought he was annoying. But then when I actually listened to his albums and songs, I was like, oh, he's fantastic. That said, I don't love everything he's done. I've actually not been a big fan of his last couple studio albums. I have some controversial opinions, being like, I don't think Nebraska is one of his best, like some people do, or The River. But that said, I still love a majority of his work. I've seen him live once on the River tour, the recent River tour, and he was fantastic. And yeah, so I'm a huge fan. Tony, where do you stand with Bruce in the E Street Band?
So this is probably not what I would have said a few years ago, even. But for Bruce, before this record, I was honestly very neutral with it. I felt like I approached this album with an open mind. My relationship with Bruce is kind of sparse. I remember when you and I lived together, we would play covers, and you wanted to do some Bruce songs, and I was still getting used to bass. So I know we did Hungry Heart, Ain't Good Enough for You, which you actually had brought up today about it. And other than that, the only thing I really knew about Bruce, I did know the song Darkness on the Edge of Town as well. And the big singles, of course. But I liked Rage Against the Machine, and Tom Morello ended up doing some touring with Bruce, so I kind of saw that, and I was kind of like, whoa, okay, this rock, innovative, weird guitarist guy is playing for this old guy? Like, what? Now, I mean, I've always liked 70s music and stuff, so that wasn't an issue, but I guess maybe back then I just kind of perceived him as being kind of bland, kind of maybe dramatic with his delivery, like kind of like, why is this old guy yelling? But I feel truthfully I've kind of shed those kind of preconceptions, and understood that those are just kind of just how I felt in the time. But honestly, I approached this with a blank slate, and without any sort of prior opinions about him.
That's good. So with you being in a different mindset now and having heard this album, the however many times you did, what decision did you come to about if you enjoyed the album or not?
I very much enjoyed this album. Dare I say love?
Okay,
we'll
we
get
finally
there.
got it. Is this fully completely his rival?
This might be. This is coming close. The Mute Math one was really good as well. But I think this one I was able to kind of connect with more in the way that I did connect with Fully Completely.
I am very glad to hear. I thought one or two things was going to happen. I thought either you were gonna love this album, or I thought it was gonna, cement the fact that Bruce is just not someone you like. Which I would say he's one of those artists where you either love him or you just hate him, despise him.
No, no.
Because you find him annoying, not because you think he's like a bad person. You just don't like his style of music. My girlfriend Lindsay does not like his music whatsoever. Doesn't like a single song. Does not like his voice. Where I'm the opposite. I love his stuff, and I know you were kind of in the middle, not knowing a majority of his songs or albums. So I kind of thought this album would either make you possibly a future fan, or would just confirm that he's just not a artist you like.
I mean, I will say this, confirming what you said, or validating it, I should say. You're the only person I know that actually likes Springsteen. Now, that being said, I have a friend, and she literally has a Springsteen record, and she's from New Jersey, but she doesn't listen to it. She's not into Bruce. I have an older friend, and he used to do live sound work for, the smaller band JoJo Gunn, and they literally, did a show with Springsteen before he made it really big. Um, and even that friend, he isn't a huge Springsteen fan. Obviously, has a lot of respect for him, and like some of his songs, but I don't know anyone else that actually is into Springsteen.
And that's because I do think his audience are a different generation. You and I are, we're young, we're, in our 20s. And, Bruce, this album came out in 78. So a majority of his fan base is going to be, I don't want to say old, but on the older side, definitely older than us. So that's not super shocking for sure. Even though he does have I would say he does have a portion of his audience that are younger. But so on first listen, was it love at first listen, like with like Fully Completely? Or was it like, okay, I like this, I enjoy this, and then as each listen you liked it more?
So a little bit of both. A little bit of both. So when I put on the record, I was driving to work, just nice neutral day, wasn't bad weather, like total neutralness. Um, and the first song comes on, I'm like, cool, kind of what I was kind of expecting from Bruce. And then, not to get into too many details on the individual songs yet, but Adam Raised a Cain came on next, and I wasn't expecting such a rocker. Now I knew Bruce had it in him, I knew he does, but I just wasn't expecting that. It kind of hit me hard. And then Something in the Night kind of showed another side of him, and then Candy's Room. We're gonna talk about that one for a while. But so what I'm getting at is that the first four songs really grabbed me in. I actually really enjoyed them. It was already painting a really good image for the band. Like I felt like I was already connecting to them as musicians and writers. But I will say, from Racing in the Street to Streets of Fire, that was a slump for me on my first couple listens.
And I kind of predicted that, by the way, in my head.
Okay, I could totally see that. Now, that being said, though, Prove It All Night and Ending with Darkness on the Edge of Town, those, especially because I already knew Darkness, and Prove It All Night is, more of one of the rock songs, like that kind of got me back in the zone. So I do admit that although there was the slump in the middle, this album did grab onto me pretty quickly. I think by my third listen, which granted I've done at least 10 listens easy, on my third listen, I was already like, okay, I like these songs. These are the ones that I don't like as much. And I think, by this time now, I love all the songs except one of them.
Okay. So let's talk about that one first because it is the outlier. And even with like Fully Completely, I think I can't remember which there was one that you didn't love as much. And so I think it was kind of similar. My guess originally I kind of thought Racing in the Street was one that because it's almost 7 minutes, which I always forget how long
Whoa,
it is.
whoa, whoa, whoa. It's almost 7 minutes?
It's 6:53. Yeah, I'm looking at the track list right now.
So it doesn't just feel long, it actually is long.
No, yeah, it is long. It doesn't. I don't think it's 7. It does. It feels like a 5 minute song, maybe bordering on 6. It doesn't feel to me like an almost 7. So that was going to be my first guess, but I could see Factory maybe being like the boring song to you. And if I'm being honest, Factory is maybe my least favorite, but it's also only 2 minutes, like barely 2 minutes. So is it one of those two songs?
Factory is barely 2 minutes.
It's 2:17. Yeah.
So this album, I guess, abandons the perception of time because I'm
Well, because
these
it's
are
only 10
shots.
songs. It's 10 songs, but it's 42 minutes. So, and that's because you do have the almost 7 minute racing in the street and something in the night's over 5 minutes. And then most of the other songs are 3 to 4 minutes, except for Factory, which is kind of the shorter, the by far the shortest on the album. But so yeah, it's like it doesn't have a ton of songs, but each song does kind of pack a punch. But is Factory or Racing the Street one of your least favorite?
Yes, so Factory is my least favorite. Now, Racing in the Street took some growing. It really did. But let's just focus on Factory here. It is my least favorite because to me, it's kind of like a mix of Streets of Fire and Promised Land, which I don't think that's outlandish to say. I mean, what do you think? Does that seem accurate to you?
I mean, I are you talking about musically?
Yeah, and so like, I should explain. So, Promised Land is I mean, I think lyrically, Promised Land and Factory can kind of be kind of similar because like Promised Land says something about taking his ear, like working or something. Doesn't he say Factory in that song? Or is that
Um,
literally Factory?
I'll pull up the lyrics. I mean, I know he's literally sings the word factory
In
in
Factory.
factory. I'll pull up the lyrics really quick. I mean, the Promised Land definitely, when it comes to lyrics, it is it is kind of like straightforward. Like and it's kind of the subject in a lot of his songs, even on this in this album about you know trying to work at a dream, which again is like again mentioned in Badlands as well. And Factory, I would say, is like in the Promised Land he's singing about he believes in a promised land and a land where, like you can make something happen. And where in Factory he's actually singing about the people who and his the factory is actually inspired by his father who did work in a factory when Bruce was growing up, and about the people who live that type of lifestyle, people who like they just go to work and then come home and that's it. Like, they lived a factory life. So yeah, in a sense they're kind of similar where like Promised Land is like kind of his more dramatic, like his vision of the world or the town that he lives in. And then Factory is like the more harsh reality of it.
Yeah, yeah. So to me, and I'm not saying just because they have somewhat related topics that it sounds like it or it's that similar, but it's kind of like that sort of vibe, but it's also kind of a shorter song like Streets of Fire with kind of the simple chords, simple melody. Like I don't know, it felt kind of like okay, like the Promised Land and Badlands are maybe a little cheesy sounding. I think it's kind of safe to say. And Factory just felt like cheesy enough to the point where it actually took the song down a notch for me. And it just I don't know, it just doesn't feel as strong and it's short, but it's not really succinct to me, you know?
It is probably my least favorite now. My least favorite actually for the longest time used to be Something in the Night. It took me forever to get into that song.
Get out of here. You're
Yeah,
fired.
we'll talk about that one later when you talk about it. But Factory nowadays is probably my least favorite, but I still really enjoy the song. Is it a song I listen to outside of the album much? No, but for a 2 minute song on an album full of bangers, at least in my opinion, I'm totally fine with Factory. Like it to me does not bring the album down. I think lyrically it fits the themes of the album, and musically it fits it. Yeah, it's for sure musically not the most interesting. It's a
Yeah,
slower pace, you know.
I think that is a big part now that we're kind of discussing it more. I think a big part too is that it didn't have a lot of like the things that made the other songs really interesting or cool or enjoyable. The Factory lacked. Even the vocal performance, I didn't really love as much as the other ones. Um, so I don't know. That was kind of the weakest one to me. It's not bad to listen to, and fortunately, it's short. But I don't think I could ever see myself really clicking on Factory to listen to by itself. Where
That's fair because I'm
honestly,
the same.
all the other ones I probably would. So I would say the other song that I had a hard time really grabbing at first was "Racing in the Street." Probably just because of the length, and even though I like it now, it is more on the boring side. But what you can really appreciate, at least for me, is the dynamics.
Yes, I literally had that word in my brain when
And
I listened to the song last night again.
and the dynamics are so cool because a song like Candy's Room, the dynamics are great, but they're kind of obvious dynamics. Okay, let's get
Yeah,
loud. Let's
the
put
song
drums.
is literally dynamics.
Right. But um with Racing in the Street, there's that maturity. There's guitar parts that come in and come out, same with the keys, and they're powerful dynamics that make a huge difference, but it's done subtly. And I think that really makes me appreciate the song, and that helps me get into kind of the pacing of the song. Um,
Yeah, because it starts off with just like piano, right? It's just piano and his voice. And then like, I don't know, like if you call it the second verse, Max's drums come in and he's just kind of doing like the what do you call it? Where you just tap like your stick.
oh, like
Like,
the cross stick? Is that what they
yeah,
call
he's
it?
kind of doing like a cross stick thing. And that kind of almost speeds up the song a little bit. And then you have Danny's organ come in, which adds more layers and more depth to the song. And then yeah, the song kind of swells, guitar parts come in at certain moments like you talked about, and the song just kind of gets bigger and bigger until you get where it's just Bruce and drums for a minute.
Which that
And that
happens like 3 times on this record.
yeah, cuz the first time it happens for sure is in Something in the Night, which I actually think Something in the Night does it better. I don't know
But
if it's just the chords.
but what does it the best though is Prove It All Night.
Yeah, it's done. Yeah, all three songs have a very similar moment where it's just after like the solo or the climax of the song, it's just drums and his voice. And I think Racing the Street out of those three is the one where you're like, if he would have cut that part and made the song shorter, would have been better, maybe. But yeah, it still has a ton of great um dynamics in the song. I just love the piano itself. It's actually one of the first things I learned how to play on the piano because the chords are
Oh,
pretty simple. And that little just
a
a
little
little
small melody.
yeah, it's very simple to play it with your right hand, and then the chords on your left hand are pretty easy. So it was one of the first things I learned. I actually learned it when I was taking piano in high school.
And that's something too that I can kind of actually connect back to Factory kind of lacking. This whole album does a great job of throwing in these short and fairly simple melodies, but done very well. And they add to the song a lot, and they contrast from kind of the more, the more. Bruce doesn't sing like vocal melodies. He kind of does these kind of simple melodies. So it was cool hearing those in the songs that are memorable. And Factory had a weaker one to me, but like Racing in the Street had a really powerful one. Um, so sorry to jump back to Factory again, but I think this album has a lot of similar musical ideas and approaches, and I think Racing in the Street was kind of what may seem like a boring song. They used all of those elements and just really made the song something great.
And I think a great thing too with Racing in the Street for me is that's a song where when I was younger, when I first heard it, I was really taken back by the lyrics because he's like telling a story, which is a lot of what Bruce's songwriting is lyrically. It's like stories, it's characters. And if that's something, if you're just someone that's not a lyrics person, they're just gonna fly by you. And if you're only paying attention to music, Racing the Street's still a song you can enjoy musically because it develops. But when I first heard it, I didn't even really care about the dynamics and the development of the music because I was just really, like studying the characters and this person who's like really into his car and talking about building it with a friend and racing it and gambling and the love interest, and it's just like it's like a mini movie in a song. And that's a big thing with his lyrics. Where like Factory, that's a song where there's not really a story. He's just talking about these type of people who work in a factory. So that's all. That's not one where you can really get into lyrically. That one, it's only relatable, I guess, if you ever worked in a factory.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying. And to be honest, the lyrics aren't one of the highest points on this album for me. Um, that being said, I don't think they're bad. And this song, Racing in the Street, I do think they're well written. And I do think that he really thought about the lyrics. I feel like they're more than just, oh, here's a little story I put together for like a blues song. Like it did feel like, he put care into it. So I respect that. I guess I am more affected or more impacted by his actual performances, which are great. Like honestly, as I was listening to this record, like even on the first listen before I even got halfway through, I was like, wow, I wish Bruce was my singer. Like, can you imagine just playing and you got someone like Bruce just pouring his heart out into the music, just like, it sounds like he's just giving it his all and everything.
Yeah, and that's why I think some people who don't like his voice, I always just tell them, I'm like, just try to get past his voice for a minute, because like if you're listening to his emotion, he puts more emotion into his songs than I feel like almost anyone that I listen to.
You
Like
know,
he puts so much into his songs. Like he's performing the songs as if he's performing them in like a concert for the last time ever.
that's a fantastic way to
Like he
describe
was
it.
told you're never going to be able to perform a song again, so he sings it with literally everything he's got.
Um, and I do like his voice. I mean, I do think it's kind of a funny voice, like you can kind of poke fun out of it, but in a great way. I mean that with as a compliment almost.
It's like
Um,
Petty, Dylan, and Neil Young, I would say.
yeah, I mean, if you're that old and you've had a career for that long, you should, think you look back and it's a little bit of its time. But I just want to say, for example, a song like Streets of Fire, if most other people sing that, that song would be like a C song. But his delivery is what sells it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, Streets of Fire, that one was a grower for me. I liked it like on first couple listens, but it wasn't until like about 3 or 4 years ago when I was listening to the album, I was like, maybe because I kind of got tired and a little bored of like the big hits like Badlands, The Promised Land. So when like Streets of Fire came on, I'm like, oh, this is a great deep cut. Like, yeah, he's just like the song kind of builds, it's kind of quiet in the first verse, and then like the chorus hits, and it's just like an eruption with the music and the vocals. And then um my favorite part in that whole song is when he sings the lyrics. I hear somebody call my name. I don't know if you know that part.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, where he's just going off.
he belts it. Yeah, I'm not gonna attempt it right now because I'm still recovering from COVID. But yeah, like he just it's like yeah, that line would have been boring without that the way he actually sings it.
Yeah, and it feels so natural. And, even though I could definitely see this being, I could see how someone could hear Bruce sing and maybe think that maybe he comes off maybe a little full of himself or something. But for me, like, I don't know what he's doing, but like, he totally transcends that. Like, I'm trying to be passionate, I'm trying to be tough. It just seeps out of him, the energy. It's fantastic. I was really taken away by that. I was not expecting for this much energy to be on the album and like kind of rawness.
Yeah, and I would say he does that on most of his albums, but this is my favorite Bruce Springsteen album. And I just feel like it's just the perfect combination of his passion, his songwriting, his lyrics. Like there are other albums of his, like even Born to Run, where I think Born to Run has a couple songs where I just feel like it has energy, but it's like lacking a little passion. Like, not that you're gonna know the songs, but for our listeners out there, like I'm not the biggest fan of like a song like Night or from Born to Run. And then I actually have a very, very controversial opinion of I actually don't think Jungle Land is one of his best songs. And I also am not the biggest fan of Backstreets. But this album, I think, yeah, it does have his best um like vocals and performances. Um And I also, kind of going into another part of the album, I think this has some of his best guitar work. And Streets of Fire is one of those songs where he does a fantastic guitar solo in the middle.
It's a vibey solo. It's not like some songs the guitar solo comes in for like, oh, here's your 8 bars, make them count.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed how Streets of Fire is more laid back. It's kind of near the end before Prove It All Night. And the long solo is kind of a vibe because it's kind of slow. He's not doing the most shreddy thing. Like I like how he hits like the low E string almost like he's coming off the riff. Um like I don't know. I something that you and I had actually discussed prior is I was kind of asking about the personnel of the band, who plays what, and I had no idea that Bruce was doing all the leads at first. I thought he mostly did rhythm. I didn't realize he took charge of that. And granted, I think that's a compliment because most lead singers or songwriters don't have quite those chops, or at least, the being able to just play something naturally, as an extension of themselves. Um, and and kind of not to digress too much from that point, but I do love the production of the record, like that kind of dry '70s record, and those Telecaster tones that are real in your face, but they're kind of real distorted. Like I really did like the musicianship on this album. And once again, I'm sorry to go all over the place, but like, Adam Raised a Cain. There was a really cool part, I think, before the last verse, where after the solo, they do this like cymbal wash kind of pause thing. That was super cool.
Yeah, it's like a live, something like you would do when you're performing live, right? I think I know what part you're talking about. Kind of where it's like, I don't know how you describe it, but it's like everyone's kind of like pausing and just they're kind of vamping, and like it is kind of like a pause, and then like he hits you with that vocal of that third verse, and it's just like so over the top, but it somehow works perfectly.
Yeah, they made it work perfect. And Something in the Night, which I do want to talk about more later. I believe that's the one where when the drums enter, they start by doing like this fast little, they just he hits like the floor tom really fast and kind of builds it up.
Yeah, it's like a yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. We're not drummers, so
I'm not sure the best phrase for that term,
but yeah, it's like a long roll that just kind of gets louder and louder until like yeah, it just the full drums enter the song.
And I know that like like you could pick like the Mute Math record, and that's nothing compared to like that sort of musicianship. But this thing, those little details like this, I get a personality for the musicians that way. And it's something beyond just, okay, let me put the drum machine doing this beat, call it good. Like, it was those little details that really elevated this record for me.
Yeah, and that's why I picked this one out of some of his albums, because like I could have given you Born in the USA, but like I knew this album would have things you would love. I knew you would love the guitar work on this album, even if you didn't like the songs themselves. I was like, there's no way he's not going to love the guitar in Adam Raised a Cain or the guitar in Candy's Room. And I did go into it knowing that like some of his kind of what I call them his Bruce anthems, Badlands and The Promised Land, I kind of figured there's a chance you're going to find them a little cheesy. And then I kind of thought some of the ballads like Something in the Night and Race in the Street, you might find a little sappy. But I knew there was going to be songs like Adam Raised a Cain, Candy's Room, Streets of Fire, Prove It All Night, title track. I knew you were going to find things in them that you were going to enjoy, where there are some guitar solos in his other albums like Born in the USA, but there's a lot of songs where it's not, and it's the musicianship is still great, but it's a lot more simplified. And that this way, if you get into Bruce Springsteen, like you can see other sides of him than just like his standard big hit songs like Hungry Heart or, Born to Run.
Yeah, and kind of part of why I like bands like STP, I really liked Fully Completely, is because it's not so many musicians. It's like here's the guitars, here's the bass, keys are doing this. It really feels like these musicians are working together. Like it feels personal. And that being said, you can have a whole Beach Boys sort of arrangement where you have like 20 musicians in a room and it still feels personal and you still do get an idea of those musicians. but it's just kind of nice to hear it contained within this album. And all of those, like, there is a lot of guitar solos, maybe more than some of his other albums, you're saying. But I think in all those instances of them, the musicianships and the solos really felt fitting and added to the song. Um, and you were saying that maybe Badlands and The Promised Land I wouldn't like as much.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about next. What did you feel about those? Because those are like songs he plays like at every show because they're just like perfect songs for a live audience. You know, people like chant to them and they're like very like they make you want to get up and like sing along and they're both kind of similar in that sense. I like Badlands more. I think it's got a little bit of a harder edge. There's a great guitar solo in it. I Clarence Clemens saxophone solo in Badlands I think is one of his best. I love it. I love the Promised Land too. Promised Land has the harmonica, which I think is very fitting for the song. But Badlands to me is just a little bit more up, like a tiny bit more like pep in its step.
Doesn't Factory also have harmonica?
It might. I cannot
Maybe
think
I
of it
could
at the
be
top of my
wrong.
head, but I
Not
do
not
know
to
Bruce.
attack it.
Bruce is the one that plays it on the album. At least I know, like
Oh,
on Promised Land. Yeah,
also didn't know that.
yeah, he's
Um,
credited for the harmonica.
I do have to agree with you. I do like Badlands more than The Promised Land. I like both of those songs. They do kind of suffer from they sound kind of patriotic, which not my favorite thing about it. But something interesting, and I haven't actually thought about this note I took for Badlands. But when I first heard Badlands, I don't know what it was, but it reminded me of Best Friend's Girl from the Cars. Like for some reason I felt like I was just in
Hmm.
my head singing that song over Badlands kind of. Um
Maybe they share similar chords.
yeah, probably, and I don't mean that in a rip off way, but for some reason my brain just kind of popped that up. But yeah, I think Badlands has a lot of energy. I think the vocals are actually kind of similar to The Promised Land, but I think they sound a little better.
It's more
Um,
fun. Like in Badlands, like there's a part, one of my favorite parts is where it's like, poor man want to be rich, rich man want to be king. Like I love singing along to that part whenever I'm listening to the album. Like it's a little bit more like I can sing along to it a little bit more. And I just feel like his vocals in the chorus are just a little bit more passionate.
right.
Um, and like there's a good saxophone in both songs, but I just prefer the one in Badlands. It's a little bit more rock, you know. Um, but I like them both. I really like the lyrics a lot in The Promised Land, and I think The Promised Land chorus is maybe catchier if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's surprisingly kind of more pop.
Like I can hear the chorus right now in my head, well, the dogs on the street, how they understand. Like the melody is fantastic in that song.
Yeah, I think to me, I think they do just suffer from sounding very patriotic. Especially The Promised Land. Badlands to me, I do enjoy more. I feel like I can just kind of view it as like a normal song, not as cheesy. And really, it's one of those things too, where like once you listen to 30 seconds of Badlands, like I'm in the song. I'm not even thinking about it being cheesy. I know I'm bringing those points up a lot for these songs, but I do, it's just more, it's like a property of the song. It's not something that is negative about the song necessarily, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, I understand. Like those songs definitely do have a very distinct kind of feel. Kind of the people originally and still do think like the song "Born in the USA" is a patriotic song, and it's the opposite.
Right, right. And yeah, and patriotic, I don't even mean the lyrics. I mean sort of that sound, kind of anthem, kind of pop, like
Yeah, it's
that's
definitely
more what I'm after.
it's falls in the category one of his subgenres, which is heartland rock.
Yes, you mentioned that to me, and yeah, that
Yeah,
definitely makes sense.
Petty does a lot of heartland rock in his first couple albums, and I would say Badlands and Promised Lands are very much heartland rock, which is a genre not for everyone. And even like I said, I can only take so much of that. That's why I really enjoy songs on this album that don't have that style, like Candy's Room, Adam Raised a Cain. Um, we gotta talk about Candy's Room. Is this your
Yeah.
favorite on the album?
Wait, one thing real quick.
Oh yes.
According to Google, one of the genres of this album, the first one they list is rockabilly. I don't know who's monitoring Google right now, but I
Well,
did
on
not get vibes.
Wikipedia,
Or
it
yeah,
says
Wikipedia. Sorry.
well for me when I looked it up on Wikipedia, it said rock, hard rock, and heartland rock.
Oh, so maybe this really is Google saying that then.
I don't know because I don't consider this hard rock. Like even for the '70s, this isn't like Black Sabbath or anything.
Yeah, it's
The hardest,
78. Come on,
the,
yeah.
the hardest song on this album is "Adam Raised a Cain," and even that isn't like a heavy song. It's heavy for Bruce Springsteen, but not for other bands.
Maybe if there was a whole album full of songs like that, you could say hard rock, but not
Yeah,
just
and
the one
he's never
song.
had an album that was that heavy, like an album full of Adam Raised a Cain.
Yeah, yeah. So so Candy's Room, let's jump into that. I'm excited now because let's jump into some of the songs that I really liked, that really grabbed me. Now, Candy's Room, fourth song on the album, that song totally blew my mind. Absolutely. I was not expecting Bruce to come at me like that. And additionally, it didn't just blow my mind for being a Bruce song. I was like, wow, I have not heard a song like this before. Like, this is really refreshing. I needed a new song in my life like this, like it was like it's like, sometimes like when I listen to the Beach Boys and I hear something new, which I'm kind of going into them again, and I'm like, wow, that's genius. I'm gonna copy that, I'm gonna steal it. That was Candy's Room. I know I'm hyping it up, but I really enjoyed it.
Candy's Room, over the years, it's only grown on me more. I always loved it on first listen. And I used to say my favorite song on this album, I used to say it was the title track, which we will get to. For a period, I probably said Badlands. For a period, I probably said Adam Raised a Cain. But I think if you were to ask me today, it honestly is Candy's Room. Is it like the best song on the album? Maybe not, because I do think there's some songs that have better lyrics, like the title track. But it is the song that excites me the most every time. It's the one I'm looking forward to the most every time I spin the record. Like, it is so good. It is, and it's kind of different for him. Like, there's not any other song in his catalog that I would say is similar to Candy's Room.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's the most musically interesting. And let me tell you why. Um so first off, it's just badass how the song starts with the fast hi-hat that doesn't stop. And when it does stop, it's switching to the fast snare. Um and I remember hearing it, I was like, "Oh, a fast song. That's cool." Nice melody comes in. Bruce does his little talk in the beginning, and I enjoy it. I enjoy it. Once again, this I had an open mind. I liked it. And then when he comes in with the actual piano part, starting to sing the song, I was kind of like, oh, okay, so this is like a Bruce song. This sounds very Bruce. But then, but then, when he comes in with "We Kiss" and the band comes in, everything
Explodes.
changes. Yeah, absolutely explodes. Um,
Like, the piano gets louder, the guitars are just like electrify. Like you said, the drums go from just that really fast hi-hat to the really fast snare.
and I'm not even like I love bass, doing octaves, but I'm not the biggest fan of that. I think it's overused for some things, but I thought the bass was perfect for that.
I'm
The
glad you
way
picked
it
that
does the
up,
progression.
because when I was listening to the song last night, because I think my biggest problem with most Bruce Springsteen songs is the bass doesn't always have the most interesting part. A lot of times it is just root notes. There's not a lot of songs where the bass is a standout moment. Not that the band's bassist is bad, his name is um, Gary Talent, I believe, and he's been with them since I think maybe the second album, and he's great. It's just like that Bruce's music doesn't always call for bass, like the Red Hot Chili Peppers or Primus or Rage Against the Machine. But in this song, yeah, it's like it really adds to the fast pace of the song. Like the oct, and when I was listening last night, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's octaves. As someone who doesn't play a lot of bass and doesn't know a lot about the bass, I was like, I even think I know that's octaves, but I feel like it's very fitting for the song.
Yeah, and the little cool music theory kind of bit about this is that section where he says "We Kiss" all the way until the song changes. It's done in groups of 7 measures, which is kind of interesting. Normally, you would go for, 2, 4, even 3 or 6. But so 7 measures, to loop is pretty cool. And it feels just slightly weird, like something's different.
So it's still in 4/4, the
It's
song,
still in
the
4
whole song.
4. Yes, but there are 7 measures of 4 4 before you loop and repeat the progression.
And see, that's nothing I ever would have thought about because my mind just doesn't work that way for everything music theory. I more recently I've started to notice things more often, but that's something I would have never really noticed.
Yeah, I heard it, and with kind of the way the bass outlines the progression underneath that section, I was like, there's something different there. And I told myself, okay, I'm gonna finish the song and then I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna listen to the song again, but I'm gonna count it. So I counted it, and yeah, and that's how I came to that conclusion, which was very cool. Another thing that was very cool is, um, no, actually, I skipped a step. So once you get to the next section, she says, "Baby, if you want to be wild," it kind of switches to more what I would expect Bruce to do. But something that stood out to me is this is the first part on the album where I was like, whoa, that backup vocal kind of sounds like Brandon Flowers. Is that just me? Is that just me?
I never thought of that, but that's not a crazy thing to think about. And I'll try to keep this short. Bruce is definitely one of Brandon Flowers' heroes musically. Growing up, he loved Bruce Springsteen. Sam's Town, the Killer's second album, Brandon Flowers, lead vocalist, is very inspired by Bruce Springsteen to the point where the bridge little section in When You're Young is almost a complete take on the bridge section in Born to Run, where it does the walk down of the singular notes doing da na 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 da na na da. That's like the same thing that Bruce does in Born to Run. And over the years, they've become friends. Brandon Flowers has actually covered The Promised Land with Bruce. He's covered Thunder Road with Bruce. And in the last couple of years, they actually released the studio version of Bruce doing a new version of the Killer song, A Dustland Fairy Tale with Bruce.
Oh, wow.
So they like the Bruce Springsteen loves the Killers. He thinks they're one of the best bands out there right now. Brandon Flowers adores Bruce Springsteen. So yeah, I mean, that's probably, even though I've never thought about it, especially with this song, I do think some Killer songs and a lot of songs on like Battleborn, their fourth studio album, I think there's a lot of Bruce Springsteen influences. So I think that's very much on point. Like he sometimes sings like Bruce because he grew up listening to Bruce.
Yeah, and I would say kind of the most Brandon Flowers moment on this record is probably just how Bruce starts off racing in the street, kind of just with kind of the simple vocal melody that you can follow, and just something about it kind of really reminded me of that. But um about Candy's Room, kind of can continue on with that. The structure is great, how out of that little B section they go back into the rock part, but not for too long. They go to the sudden break with Bruce just ripping it on guitar, just something raw and energy. And what I thought was super cool as well, one of my favorite details, is halfway through during the solo when the band comes back in, they're coming back in and the bass is doing the same octave thing as that earlier rock section. It's just different chords. So I thought that was a really clever way to connect the song back and to get it in motion to where it was. Yeah, so loved it. It probably is my favorite off the record just because it's so exciting. I did want to discuss you. This is one of the ones where I actually wanted to talk about the lyrics because I want to like the lyrics a little more, but I don't really know what he's talking about. I originally thought that maybe it was kind of like a song about a prostitute, particularly the part where he's like sounds kind of convinced that, oh, people are calling my baby's number, but she knows I'm, Candy's boy, like kind of like he's fallen in that trap or something. I don't know if I was like, that's kind of dark, but kind of cool. But then when I listen to the rest of the album, a lot of the lyrics kind of seem more about him being a little bit of a greaser, which I didn't know that about Bruce, that his kind of image was like that a little bit. So yeah, I don't know. Do you have any insight on what the song is about? Whether it's just him and a girl or
It's one that I don't know if he's ever really spoken out about what it's about. And there are books where people go over every single song lyric of his. Um, as far as I know, the general consensus is that it is about either like a prostitute or like a stripper. Because when you hear the name Candy, it is like a stripper name or like a prostitute name. Like generally, that's stereo. I mean, that's very much a stereotype. Don't get me wrong, but um, and yeah, there's a lyric specifically where he sings, "Strangers from the city call my baby's number and they bring her toys. When I come knocking, she smiles pretty. She knows I want to be Candy's boy." Where I think you could say that even if it's not about like a stripper prostitute, it is about this girl who is very popular. And some people also speculate that it's just like a fantasy. It's like him having a fantasy about someone that he really likes. And the whole second part where he's talking about when they kiss and the blood rushing through his veins, like that's just him having like a fantasy and that he's way out of her league. So it's actually one of the songs I find it very interesting because he's not singing about a general love song and he's not singing about the American dream. It's like almost this fantasy, like teenage boy lust song. Um, and it fits the music perfectly. The music is like very chaotic, but in a controlled way. And I feel like it's just one of the songs where the lyrics really fit that, you know?
And I think to me, what does make me like the lyrics a little more, like I like in this song, just because I like it so much, I wish I knew what the lyrics meant a little more. But I think what I like about the lyrics that really works with kind of being a little more ambiguous is that part where he says there's a sadness hidden in that pretty face, a sadness of her own or whatever. But then the way he says, from which no man can keep Candy safe, like there's just something about how he says it, the part of the song, how it goes into the rock section after. Love that part.
Yeah, it is very like,
Theatrical almost.
yeah, but it works so well. One of my favorite parts on the whole album when it comes to production is, I don't know if you caught this, the outro, and I really caught this. I've always thought about it, but last night when I was listening to it, the coming out of like with the verse after the guitar solo, which they're calling a bridge on this website I'm looking at. Um, there's a part where he's like, "But they don't see," and then he sings that what she wants is me. They do the panning on the vocals, where it's back and forth every other word. It's like the what she wants is me. I don't know if you caught that. I love that in the song.
Let me give that another listen. I admit that most of the listens were in my car or sometimes when I was at work wearing headphones, but sometimes I can't focus as much on those little details like that. So I'm
Yeah,
definitely going to go back and listen.
it's right before the outro, right before he comes in with the "oh, and I want her so I'll never let her go." It's right before that.
Okay, I know what part you're talking
And the
about.
panning part is with those vocals. It almost sounds like it's like two vocalists because it's panning back and forth every word, every other word. But yeah, I love Candy's Room. It's an event. It's like a ride. It's like a roller coaster ride. At no point is it boring because even in the beginning, it's like it's a little tense with the drums and his speaking, and then like you said, when he transitions from the speaking to the kind of singing, and then the "no man can keep Candy safe," and then it goes into the full on instrumentation. Like it's very exciting. There's some great live versions. I love the Paramount version that they did, I think in like '07.
I saw that. That was great.
Love
Really
that.
great.
And then what I hate is, so they just finished a US tour, Bruce's first tour with the E Street Band since before COVID. Um, he's released, I think, I want to say 3 albums since his last tour. One of them being a covers album, so it doesn't really count. But and before COVID, his concerts used to be like he'd play 3.5 hours long. He'd do deep cuts every night, change the set list. When I saw him, he did the entirety of the River album because it was something he was doing every night on that tour. It was to celebrate the anniversary of the River. But then he also did deep cuts. He did Adam Raised a Cain when I saw him, which was fantastic. And he even brought Eddie Vedder on stage to sing one of his songs called Bobby Jean. But on this tour, he's kind of sticking with the same set every night. And there's a section where he'll kind of exchange songs for other songs. Every night he was bringing in a new song. So almost every show did get like a specific song that wasn't played before. Um, but he had a set of songs that he would play every night: Thunder Road, Promised Land, Badlands, Prove It All Night. And for some reason, Candy's Room was one of the regulars on this last tour. He played it almost every night.
That's
And
awesome.
and I did not see him on this tour. One, because I just haven't enjoyed his last couple of albums, truth be told. And
He's getting old.
no one would go with me because I'm the only one that likes Bruce Springsteen. You and I should have gone. Now that you like this album, you probably would have loved the tour because he played like half this album live. And yeah, he
Ugh.
was playing Candy's Room every night. And every time I saw the set list, I was like, why is he all of a sudden playing this fantastic song? Like, I would have loved to have seen this song when I saw him in 2017. But yeah, Candy's. We could talk all day about Candy's Room. It's fantastic. There is an alternative version called Candy's Boy, which you listen to. I assume you hated it because it's the complete opposite of what Candy's Room is.
I only listened to it once, so I couldn't say that I hate it. It was not bad where I was like, oh, I hate that. But it didn't really grab me.
Yeah, it's like a
Um,
really, it's like what you would expect a normal Bruce Springsteen song to sound like.
except you
It's
have
not.
the expectations of it being as cool as Candy's Room.
Yeah, no, Candy's Room's fantastic. Like I said, we can talk all day. I'm super excited. You like? I was like, if he likes just one song on this album, let it be Candy's Room. Um, one of that's a song where like I consider it to be one of his best deep cuts for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
I could totally see that. Can we talk
yeah,
about my one of my other favorites?
yeah,
So I don't know if I would say it's my number two favorite. But like the other song, like the other three that I really like are Something in the Night, Prove It All Night, and the title track. I want to talk about Something in the Night because I want to shout out some things that I thought were really cool about it.
yeah. And this was the one song that for a while I could not get into. So I'm shocked that it only took you this small amount of listens for you to really enjoy it.
I mean, I liked it on first listen. I like it a little more now, just that I know it better. But this, at Candy's Room, I talked about how I heard it and I was like, oh, I need to go back and count it. Something at Night was kind of the same, which you might not expect, but it's actually really clever. This one thing. So the song starts off and it has like the melody and it goes back and forth between two chords. There's big, they stay on the chords for a long time because it's slower tempo. So you're really like ingrained, it really gets ingrained in you, like the progression. And he starts his chants and it sounds great and everything. But when the vocals come in on the second chord of the progression, which kind of flip-flops it because the vocals came in on a different chord. And there's only two chords, so it's kind of weird how it kind of swapped. Like I was not expecting that and I almost didn't catch it. But I was like, wait a minute, because I was like following and it just felt a little off. So
I certainly didn't catch it.
very subtle, but it was cool, and that's what I liked about it. Same with how like the drums kind of come in with the roll with the bass. Um, the other thing that I really thought was cool is because in the intro when he chants, he kind of does like the uhs, whatever. But at the end, he does the same thing, but obviously it's so much bigger. The full, wow,
And
he's
I
just
actually
crying
didn't
out.
like that on first listen. Like that was the one point when I was listening through his discography where I was like, I can see why some people think he's an annoying vocalist. Now I love it, but it took me a while to like that because he does it so over the top, it's almost obnoxious.
It's a little bit
It's like he's
comedic.
wailing. He's like, like I can't even do it, but like, um, so and we were texting about this album, not trying to show our cards. You just texted me that, and you're like, "Can you guess what song that's from?" And I'm like, "That's got to be Something in the Night." Um,
Yes. But no, I loved it though because I thought it was cool that like even though he's doing those yells in the beginning, they're much more reserved in comparison. I think what was cool too is the way they mixed the vocals. They had a certain kind of reverb sound that I thought complemented him, but it wasn't too drenched in like delay or reverb. And kind of another small detail, but when he starts doing the wahs at the end, like the really big ones, he hits like this chromatic walk down note that kind of sounds funny, like kind of like
oh, is it like lined up with the drums?
I think so, yeah,
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
yeah, and it like I heard it and I was like, oh, did he miss the note? But he kind of resolved it in a unique way, and I was like, that is cool. That is something that I wouldn't have thought of or done naturally. That's not instinctual, but now I kind of want to maybe steal that later because that caught me off guard. The only thing I would have to say that I didn't gel with at first was the vocal and drum only bit. And I mean,
Oh,
I
see,
think
that's what I like the most, I think, in the song.
this is a nitpick, I know, but when you have a song with such great dynamics and details, you can nitpick more. The drums felt like they were playing just a little bit too behind Bruce's vocals, or you could say Bruce was singing a little bit in front of it. Doesn't really matter. The drums felt a little too behind it for me. It felt just a little awkward. It's grown on me though, and I don't think that ruins the section. But I do prefer the dropout more and prove it all night because I think
Because
it's a little shorter and I can just get in the groove still more.
I will say this, I think it's in. I don't know if you noticed this, and I forgot to bring this up in Racing in the Street. The same thing that happens in Racing in the Street as in these other two songs. I think in Racing in the Street, there's not when he's first singing with just the drums, but after a little bit, there's like the backing vocals. I don't know if you noticed it, where they're almost like this, like humming, like
Oh, like the little low note, right?
yeah, but yeah, and it's like I don't know if it's just one backing vocals or if it's like multiple, put together, but it sounds like kind of holy, kind of, and that when I hear it, sometimes in the right mood can like trigger like an emotional thing for me. And I feel the same thing with Something in the Night, but it's different. It's because all the grand music that was happening in Something in the Night goes away and it's just the drums and vocals. I really focus on his vocals and the lyrics. The last lyrics in Something in the Night are just like they're just so like sad. Like they're just I don't know. Like to me, it makes the song like the first like chorus and verse. I'm like, there's not even really a chorus. It's just like the first couple verses are just and then like the bridge is nice, where it gets kind of more dramatic and the backing vocals where the nothing is forgotten or forgiven. That part
Yeah.
that's nice, but I don't know. I really enjoy the last verse where it's just him and the drums. But I could see why. And I like I said on first listen, I did not really enjoy the song, so it is one that really had to grow on me over time. Um, but I'm glad you really enjoyed it because I kind of thought there's no way he's gonna like both Racing in the Street and Something in the Night, and you kind of do. I mean, you much prefer it sounds like Something in the Night, but I'm just shocked that you actually found things to enjoy in both songs, especially this one.
You have so much faith in me.
But I knew you were gonna like Prove It All Night because like that's just such a fun song. Like if someone's generally a fan of like 70s rock music, I don't know how you couldn't like Prove It All Night. And it's definitely a fan favorite, and it's one where there are some live versions of the song that are better than the studio version.
Oh, okay. I mean, yeah, I believe
11-minute versions.
Okay, you're losing me now. I will say, so let's say roughly, not that I've thought about this, let's say that like Badlands and The Promised Land are like B songs, like ranked B. Prove It All Night's an A, and I think the reason I make that comparison is because I feel like Prove It All Night it kind of drops some of those more patriotic kind of cheesier sounds that I would say. Once again, I know I always bring up the word cheesy. I don't want that to sound critical, but I just think it's a little more just more straightforward rock, like you're saying, but it's very catchy. It has that verse dropout that's on the record, but I like how Bruce completely changes his delivery. He does more of that whisper talk thing, but it works great.
Yeah,
Um,
the tie your hair back and a long white
long
bow, that
white
part.
bow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love how he says that. That's
Meet
very
me in the
sweet.
fields behind the dynamo. Yeah, that part's great.
Yeah, and the chords are nice. The melody is catchy. You know, it's hard not to sing along in the chorus. It gets stuck in my head. And this is actually one of the songs where I think the verse does have a noticeable bass line. It's simple, granted, and it is very much in the style of Bruce or any 70s songs like that. But it really works. And I don't know. To me, it felt like a nice little okay, here's like the last little, upbeat rock part of the album. It follows Streets of Fire, which is slower and more chill. And I think it just really works. I guess I don't have too much to actually say about it, other than I really like it and the vocals sound great.
I do want to add my favorite part in the song for some reason is the melody in the second verse. Because this is a song where you mentioned, he kind of changes up the melodies from time to time. And in the second verse, the line, and I'm just gonna sing it the way he sings it. There's the line in the second verse where he's like, Dreams came true. Oh, wouldn't that be nice? Like that little melody. I'm trying to sing it off key because um yeah, but like I just love that like little melody that he throws in there. And he does it again the next line. But if this ain't no dream, then he kind of stretches it. He's like, we're living on through the night. But it's so like staccato and like to the beat of the drums that I love that part of the song.
Yeah, and then I like that the verses, or anytime they transition to the chorus, he changes like the little last line, you want it, you take it, you pay the, like he has like the change in rhythm that kind of sets you
Yeah,
up,
or like
almost
the
like a
first
drum fill.
yeah, like the first verse was like a kiss to seal our fate tonight, a kiss too, and then that transitions right into the chorus where he sings "Prove It All Night."
Yeah, yeah, and I believe this song too. At the end, the band kind of jams off, which is nice. There's some cool drum fills.
Yeah, because there's a
Once
part
again,
where
the
he's just
band
kind of
gets to
going
have
like,
fun.
yeah, there's a part where he says he's just doing those little uh, at the end, which are just
Yeah,
kind of funny. Actually, I want to talk about that really quick. Before I do, I'll just say too, love the saxophone solo. Clarence on the song just like
probably the
kills
best
it.
Clarence moment for me on the
Yeah, I like
record.
the one in Badlands a lot too, but I love, and then this is also a fantastic solo from Bruce, and the way it comes right after the saxophone solo, I think just is amazing.
Yeah, I do
Um,
like how throughout the record, sometimes Bruce will be soloing and then Clarence will come in after. It just makes
yeah,
it feel fresh and really fun. Once again, just the character of the band.
but I do think on this album there's a lot of cool vocal moments, and you've already talked about some of them. The wailing he does at the end of Something in the Night, he does it kind of here at the end of this song. Um, I love it too in Adam Raised a Cain, where there's and Adam Raised a Cain in the chorus where he's like, Adam raised a Cain, whoa, like the backing vocals. It's probably I think it's probably Clarence and um and Steve and possibly I think Roy. They're all doing this like, kind of like chanting thing that I just think fits the song so well. And then also, when we're gonna probably get to the song next, on the title track, "Darkness on the Edge of Town," during like right before the solo, there's just like an instrumental section where they're like going, "Huh." I don't know if you know what part I'm talking about. It's very quiet. It's not in your face, but it's like right after the second chorus in "Darkness on the Edge of the Town." Like they're just playing the verse music, I think, and you can hear Bruce and I think a backing vocal just doing this really quiet, like, "Huh."
I think I know what you're talking about. I know if I heard it, I would for
It's so
sure.
subtle too that it's like it's definitely more subtle than the singing he does at the end of Something in the Night.
Um,
Um
more something in the vein of racing in the street, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I
Um
do like that there was details that weren't slammed super loud in front of the mix that like, hey, check this out. They were put there in the back for you to discover.
yeah.
That's always
I
fun.
and I do want to get to the title track because I do have a couple questions for you. But I do have to give another nod to Adam Raised a Cain. Love that song. I love how dark it is. It's a really great song to follow up Badlands for some reason. Um great like kind of great groove, kind of slower, it's a little gritty. Of course that what do you call it, tremolo picking from Bruce to start the
Yeah, in the
song.
beginning.
So in your face, got another
It-
great solo.
It's just such a nice contrast because I heard Badlands and kind of was like, okay, this is kind of what I was expecting. But then I was like, oh, Adam Raised the Cane comes on. I was like, they mean business. They're not
Yeah,
messing around.
and his vocals are just so harsh. Like the way he
Yeah,
just kind of yells Adam Raised a Cain. Lyrically, it's a really clever song because he's using religion to as a metaphor to explain like the relationship between a father and a son, which is Adam and Cain.
right.
So I think it's one of the more clever lyrically on the album songs because it's just like,
That
you
is
know,
fair. It does have more of a lyrical concept, I guess, or frame. Something I do want to say about it is I'm very much not a fan of songs, whether it's within a song or, just a whole entire song on an album. I don't like it when a band's like, okay, here's our blues song, and it's just kind of generically blues, like maybe it's supposed to be fun or something or lighthearted. But I think this is a good example of here's the only blues song on the record and it's rocking, but it's actually not done kind of jokingly. Like it feels like a legit song. It feels not wholesome. It feels genuine. Um I feel like they really nailed it, and I didn't get any sort of kind of artificial quality to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you can explain it like it's a song with a ton of other ideas that just happens to be blues.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, like it has the blues tendencies, but like when I heard it, I never really considered it blues, but can see where you're coming from. But yeah, it's just it has a lot of other cool moments. Um, and we do have to get to the title track. It was the one song on this album you have heard before because for whatever reason I played it for you when we were younger. I think when I first got into Bruce, because when I first heard this album, it was probably my favorite on the album, and it still is one of my favorites. And I remember you actually liked it, which is why I was a little surprised you never listened to his other music. Um, Going back to the song now, it's the last song on the album. It's the
Well,
title
wait,
track.
wait. I think I can answer that. I think because also probably within the same breath, you also played me "Ties That Bind,"
No,
which,
"Ties the Vine" is a great song.
well,
I
I
like
remember
that
not
better
liking
than
that
"Hungry
hook.
Heart." It's better than "Hungry Heart," I think.
That's probably true. I'm gonna have to do some critical listening after.
But going back to it now that you're older, now that your musical tastes have changed, do you like the title track on this album as much as you did before? And how do you think it fits in with the album? And what do you think of it as a closing track and a title track?
All great questions, and all ones that I was kind of going to ask you too, hoping to get your opinion on. So now, and I know this is the only song that I actually knew before all these other ones. And even though I couldn't tell you like the lyrics or anything, like I know how the hook went. I could hum it. I could hum the riff. And oddly, this song kind of feels not out of place, but it kind of feels disconnected from the other songs. And I think part of it is maybe the production sounds a little different for some reason. Like it doesn't, but I don't know if I'm making that up. Um, but I do like the song. I do like it. I think it is one of I think it I don't know how to explain it. It just feels different than the other songs. And it feels odd for a last pick. Let's start there. It's comes off as more bare bones and nostalgic than some of the other songs. Yet it feels there's something about this song. There's a quality that I cannot describe about it. Rico, what are your thoughts? Can you start this off, please?
Well, okay. I think it's kind of a misleading track because the title of the album, "Darkness is on the Edge of Town," he uses that phrase in multiple other songs, edge of town and stuff like that. I think "Drive All Night," he talks about being on the edge of town. And in this whole album, there's multiple songs. I think "Race in the Street," "Something in the Night," and "Candy's Girl," he uses the word darkness. And then there's some songs on the album like "Adam Raised a Cain" that has just that kind of darkness already in the music. But when you get to the song, musically, it's not a very dark song at all. It's kind of a triumphant song, but not in the same way that Badlands is or Promised Land. It's a more of a laid back song. And it's kind of almost musically, in my opinion, a feel good song to end the album. And lyrically, it's not even that dark. And so it's almost misleading because he sings "There's a darkness on the edge of town," but I don't really get that from the song. So
And
it's kind of weird.
and with an album that has Adam Raised a Cain and Candy's Room in the same half of the record, you think there would be another song with, maybe that much that amount of explosiveness to it. You would think that maybe they would end it with that because you don't have any songs like that on the second half. Prove It All Night's the closest you got, but that's more of a Badlands, in terms of energy. So to have it end with this simple, like you said, feel good, triumphant song is interesting. And I'm not sure, I don't know where else I would put it on the record though.
I do think it fits the album well.
It does have the good shifts in energy. The verses with the simple riff, switching to when he starts screaming on the, well, if she wants to see
yeah,
me.
I love that part every time. Yeah, it's just, well, if she wants to see me.
I almost
Uh,
like that more than I think it is a really good hook. There's a darkness on the edge of town, but I almost love him saying, "Well, if she wants to see me," just because it makes me
well,
happy hearing it.
I love the ending of "Darkness on the Edge of Town" where the phrase where he goes, "Edge of town," like that little melody is fantastic, and the drums follow it. Like I love that part.
Yeah,
And then I love the guitar solo is just like the same melody. And I know some people hate when a guitar solo is just the melody throughout the rest of the song, but in this sense, I think it works perfectly. The piano, I think, is really nice in this song.
I am one of those people that sometimes feel that maybe it's a little bit of a cop out, or there's better choices than just the melody. But I think you're right. This song,
The
that's what it
tone,
needed.
the tone of the guitar is really like deep, like it's really like kind of cowboy western sounding. Like it's got that kind of Glenn Campbell sound. I don't know. I just really like the tone of that solo, even though it is very simple. Um, and lyrically, I think it kind of sums up the whole album. Like even the third verse, where he's like, "Some folks were born into a good life, other folks get it anyway, anyhow. Well, I lost my money and I lost my wife. Them things don't seem to matter much to me now." There's other great one-liners like um, the line where he sings, "Where no one asks any questions or looks too long in your face in the darkness on the edge of town." Like it's just got really great one-liners, and I think it does embody the whole album in one song very well.
I see what you're saying, which I agree with, but I wanted to point out I think my favorite lyrics of this song. I do like the term "There's a darkness on the edge of town," but like my favorite stanza is the second verse and pre-chorus. Well, everybody's got a secret, something they just can't face. Some folks spend their whole lives trying to keep it. They carry with them every step that they take. And then, of course, then he yells, "Till someday they just cut it loose."
Yeah.
Like, I really like that. I felt that really fit the dynamic of the song.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And so I think why I had such a hard time kind of sharing my thoughts is that I enjoy the song, but it's kind of deceivingly simple. And maybe there isn't a whole lot to gather from it. I guess I was maybe expecting it to maybe have a statement on the album since it's the title track. And although I think maybe in terms of the themes and maybe the delivery, it is a good summary of the album. It's more subtle than that.
Well, I'll tell you this. I think the darkness that he's talking about on the edge of town comes from all the other songs you heard previous on the album. The father-son relationship on Anna Marie's Decaying, the broken dreams on Racing in the Streets, the love interest in Candy's Room, the working class hero in Factory, the American Dream in Badlands, and the Promised Land. Like I think all of those have darkness in them, and that is the darkness that is on the edge of town, at least where Bruce state of mind at this time.
Interesting. Okay, I can see that. I can see that. I like
Yeah,
that.
and that's a very like the album is no way a concept album, but I do think it can
That did
be
run through
summed
my
up
mind though. I did
kind
wonder
of in a
that.
loose concept of and a lot of his albums are kind of similar in that sense, but he has other albums that are kind of different concepts, and this one particularly I think is just him growing up, and here's a ton of different characters and moments and stories, and then this last song is kind of like a summary of that.
No, I think that's a pretty good analysis on that. Thank you for kind of clearing that up. And kind of just to kind of clarify, I would say this song is within my top five favorites for sure. Um, yeah, I do think I was just kind of a little puzzled by it being a little more low key. Um, but I think your kind of analysis there really helped me kind of place it in my own mind a little better.
But I am really glad you like the album. Like I said, I was like, he's either gonna love it or he's just gonna find it very boring. And it sounds like for sure you really enjoyed it. Like you said, you almost would say you love it. Definitely sounds like it's this your second favorite album out of all the ones we've done in the series, probably after the Tragically Hip's fully completely.
Yeah, I would say so. And so there's kind of like a couple ways I look at things. So for me, even though I wouldn't say this is the top 20 records I've ever heard, I don't think it's like the best record I've heard. It is kind of in the top list of my favorite to listen to. I think even though I did point out some musically interesting things that as a musician excites me, which I think shows maturity in songwriting, which are I love songwriting. That's my favorite thing to do. But as I just enjoyed listening to it, I enjoyed hanging out with the band, so to speak. And that's why I really liked Fully Completely, as I felt just like, oh, I love these guys. This is awesome. I like what they're doing. This is fun. That's why I love Shangri-La Di Da. And this album just has that quality where I just want to bond with it.
I think it has a good variety too, like the hip album. Like for sure, some of the other albums I've given you, like the Phoebe Bridgers, that has kind of just one kind of sound throughout the most part.
With the exception of Kyoto, like the only song with like drums and stuff.
Yeah, and then like, um, some even like the U2 album, even though I think it has variety, it does have a very specific sound, and the Radiohead one does too. So this one I think has different variety. It's kind of in that 70s period of music that I know you enjoy and we both enjoy a lot.
For sure.
And unfortunately, I do think if you explore the rest of his albums, you're not going to like him as much as this. But I could definitely set you up with like a playlist, and down the road, I could maybe give you another one of his for our album for album series. I would probably choose one that's a completely different style of music. So maybe one of his 80s albums or maybe even one of his solo albums. But this is, I think, I had a feeling if you were going to like one Bruce Springsteen album, it would be this one, which just happens to be my personal favorite.
Well, I think you nailed it. This might be one. Once again, I'm not trying. I am trying to have an open mind. So I don't mean this as as fact, but it seems like maybe Bruce will be one of those artists that beyond this album, it's more of a song to song case, whether I like him or not.
Yeah,
Which
and
which is
I
cool.
actually,
You don't have to
I
love everything a band does.
yeah, and I think that might be the same way with the Hip. Even we'll see. The Hip, I'm more. They're definitely a band where I'll give you another album for them for this series. Where
So
Bruce,
yeah,
I might
that's
not.
why I'm waiting to listen to more.
Yeah, same with like a band like Spoon, where like I feel like you might like some of their albums better.
Right, right.
But I think that wraps it up for this episode. Sorry if you were a little long and winded. It's our first one in a couple weeks, so
It's
and
easy
there
to
was just
get
all
carried away.
and there was a lot more to talk about than I thought. I like I said, I was like, there's gonna be a lot to talk about either if you love it or hate it. You could have been in the middle about it like you were with some of the last albums, and in which case it would have been a shorter episode. But I think we got a lot out of it. Um, and yeah, so next week we're gonna be back with Tony's suggestion of the Softies album, which the name of it.
Holiday in Rhode
Yes,
Island.
thank you. Holiday in Rhode Island is the
The
name of
green
it.
one with the picture of a bird on it.
Yes. So we'll be back next week where I'll give my thoughts about it. But yeah, let us know if this is a Bruce album you like or don't like, or if this was your first listen, let us know if you enjoyed it. And we will be back next week. Bye bye.